And next thing you know, you've got 500 noodles still flying at you, and you've got them sticking to your face and like up the wall behind you. And hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
How to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, come and join the conversation in our Facebook group.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So I have a freshly made mug of tea next to me. It's so funny because what we're going to be talking about today is very much connected to the personal power need. And since I've been back here in the UK, it's been great spending time with my family, especially my niece and my nephews. And one of the things I've noticed is how like once one of them learns that they can do something that's helpful, that I can see it meeting their personal power need to do that thing. And one of the things that has been a thing since I've come back is making me ginger tea, which is so now every time I see I see him, he's like, would you like a ginger tea, Auntie Claire? And I'm like, yes, that would be great. So it was I not only do I have tea I didn't even have to make myself, which is awesome. And it's so great when you sort of see those little things. And that's the beauty of the needs work, is that once you understand needs, you can see the needs, and that's personal power need because it's something that they've got the ability to do for themselves. And it's also value need because it's like, okay, this is something I can do. It's really awesome to see. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking today about how sometimes when you are trying to help and support somebody, especially with their personal power need, it can have the opposite effect. So
Life is complicated,
there, right?
isn't it?
Well, I think it's kind of like everything in life, in the sense that
Complicated, yeah.
well, yes.
Ding, ding,
nuance. Yeah. boundaries. Not maybe. Well, maybe sometimes. Yes, absolutely. Like, I think that what I mean by that is I think that it's like, it's important to bring balance to things. Like, even when you're doing something, and actually I think this is kind of the crux of this episode, which is that even when you are doing something that meets a need, if you're doing it out of balance, it's actually probably going to compromise your needs more than it's going to meet them. So like, think about it in terms of like exercise. Like, we know exercise supports our needs, but if you were exercising 23 hours a day, every single day, that's going to compromise the very need you are trying to get met through meeting it, and then some. And I think that this is kind of a very similar thing. And I think it's so difficult when there are two people involved. Like, this is the power and the beauty of meeting your own needs, because when you meet your own needs, you know what you need to meet your needs. You know how to meet once you've kind of figured out how to meet them, if you've gone through the program,
you know how.
Yes, exactly. Once you know how, you know how. You know how much of it will meet a need. So again, it's that whole thing of like, it's like, go on.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting because I know where this is going to go, so I'm trying not to like jump there too quickly. But you know how much of something you need to meet your need, and you can also kind of dial it back if you've done something that, like, you're like, okay, I'm going to enact my personal power need. I'm going to give myself options. Whoa, I just gave myself way too many fucking options and now I'm overwhelmed. So it's like, well, okay.
Again, so let's take it in a slightly different direction. Think about it in the context of food. Like, if you are hungry and you make yourself a meal, that's great. If you made yourself enough food for 12 people and tried to eat it all, that's not only, you're not going to be hungry anymore, but you're going to have other issues because it's going to compromise other needs. You might feel sick. You might feel overwhelmed. It's that you have the ability to moderate when you are the one who is actually doing the meeting of the needs, because you can say,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, this isn't quite enough. I need a little bit more of this. Actually, whoa, too much. Okay, let's dial it down. Let's find the balance point. And that balance point is going to be different for everybody. Like, so thinking about like portion sizes, like the amount of food that I would need to eat versus what a child would need to eat versus what an elderly person would need to eat to feel full are probably all going to be different. So it helps if we're doing it for ourselves, because we know how to moderate. Then we know how
Mhm.
to say, oh yeah, this is enough. No, not quite enough. Maybe need a little bit more. Oh no, too much. Okay, let's rein it back in again.
And it
And I
uh,
go on.
oh, sorry.
No,
Um,
go ahead.
and if you think about this, like, that is a really good example, because there are times that my eyes are so much bigger than my belly, and I'm like, "I'm gonna eat all
Yes.
this food. This is all, like, I got this." And then I get
Hmm.
to it and I'm like, "Oh, I got none of this. None of, like, nope, I got like a bite of that." But if we have to do that for ourselves, and like there are times that it's challenging for us to kind of moderate what we need or actually want in the situation, expecting somebody else to be able to do it without being in your being, that's almost like, it's almost kind of mind-blowing when you think of it. Like, how is that
Yes.
supposed to work out? And we're
Right.
lucky that sometimes it does, but is it the most helpful? So that's my side
Yeah.
thought.
I just have to make a note of the fact that Daz has made his first cameo onto the podcast. He's in the background of the screen. Just because if anybody's watching on the video and you're a cat person, like the first cat cameo of Daz, who's Serena's cat. I just had to mention that.
Mr. Razzle
There we go.
Dazzle and
Yes.
his all his glory.
Anyway, this is not the cat episode. We will come back to that. We have said we will, and we will. So I think that that's the thing, is that when it comes to there being more than one person, even something that we can want to do to try and help and support can sometimes actually have the opposite effect. And this happens in a number of there are so many different examples of this.
Mhm.
Like a great example is, we've talked about this on the podcast before. Generally speaking, I'm a tactile person. There are moments, especially when I'm like in it emotionally, generally speaking, I want a hug. And there are moments where luckily Serena has known me well enough to go, do you want a hug? And I'm like, nope. um, because we have that relationship where I can say, actually, no, I don't need that right now. Or yes, I do need that. Or even if it's not being offered, being like, hey, can I have a hug? In order to get that support that I need in that moment. But if Serena had to guess and was doing it purely based on guesswork rather than asking and checking in with me ahead of time, then the chances are there are going to be a few occasions, even with people who know each other as well as we do, where she'd get it wrong, because
Mhm.
there are moments where what I need in that moment is not what I normally need in those situations. And so I think that this kind of came about based on a situation in which I was talking to somebody who I knew about some challenges that I have been experiencing. And you've probably got the impression over the past few episodes that there have been a number of these challenges of late. And I'm not going to describe how long of late is, because it's a extendable period of time depending on what we're specifically looking at. And this is somebody I hadn't spoken to in a while, and I was catching them up on the things that were going on. And what's very interesting about this is that I've had two very similar conversations of this exact nature, talking about pretty much the same exact things. And I had two completely different experiences of this, because now, both situations, the person I was speaking to was trying to help and they wanted to support, they wanted to help. The challenge was that one of these people did something that, if you listen to the podcast, if you know me, if you know what we do, generally speaking, as a general rule of thumb, what they were doing was probably, in most cases, helpful. But the issue was the quantity. So what they were doing was they were coming up with options of things that I could do. Now, bear in mind that I'm talking about a plethora of different subjects. And each one of these subjects, there were multitudes of options that were coming my way, all within the space of a couple of hours. And the interesting thing was that options, which are normally at the core of meeting our personal power need, is having options to choose from, when you have too many options, can create this kind of freeze response, because the brain gets so overwhelmed with all of the different options and with all the different things that are relevant to all the different options. Because it's not just like option A, option B, option C. Because option A requires this, and option B requires this, and option
You
C
have to break
requires
down the bullet
this.
points.
Like when you start, like it's like my brain can't even comprehend this number of options, much less actually make a choice from when I'm sitting within so many different options. And the challenge was that there wasn't enough information kind of known about the situation for the options to be off that were being offered to all be actually what's the word I'm looking for?
Relevant?
Viable. Like they weren't all things that were even possible. But because they were all being thrown in there, and I didn't have time because of the speed at which they were being thrown in to filter out the ones of like, yep, no, that's not help. No, that's not helpful. Not helpful. Okay, this one is. Let's keep that one. Let's keep this one. Okay, now I've got 3 to 5. That's a good number for me to start thinking about. But because there were so many options with respect to so many things in so many different directions, at one point I was like, I know you're trying to help, but I'm actually getting overwhelmed with the amount of different suggestions that are coming my way right now. I don't know that you've probably ever heard me say that, have you?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I mean, it's also, I know there's a certain point in like you read the person, it's like there's certain tells when somebody is starting to get overwhelmed a bit. So there's a lot that goes, like thinking of it from this point of view, and like there's a lot that goes into it. Like when I'm giving suggestions, there's so much brain work that's going on with me. Like, is this relevant?
Right.
Is it relevant to the situation? Like, because I know one of the things that was coming up in the conversations with you, it's like, I'm going to do a completely obscure example. Like, I really need some water. You know, I'm having trouble sourcing water. Well, you should get a pool. Have you thought about getting a pool?
Yes.
Well,
Why don't
I'm
you dig a
having
well?
yeah, like I'm having trouble getting a glass, so the pool might be kind of an issue. But
Yeah.
it's it's an option.
Technically,
Like,
it's an option. Yes.
and I think that's when it comes in when people are like, I want to help. I want to help. Here are all the, like, they kind of spaghetti all over you, and you're like, oh, I didn't want pasta.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing, is that like it's almost like if you imagine like, oh, I'm hungry for pasta, and yeah, throw some noodles at me, and okay, well, 5 noodles, that's probably not quite enough for a meal, but 20, that's we're good at this point. And next thing you know, you've got 500 noodles still flying at you, and you've got them sticking to your face and like up the wall behind you, and all of these things. And it's like and I said all of this was done with good intention. There was genuine desire to help, and there was genuine care behind it. But there were a few things that were fundamentally missing from that situation. The first thing was there wasn't actually any consent asked about, do you want options right now? Would that feel
That's so
helpful for you right
important.
now? Right?
So important. I didn't realize it until Claire started doing it for me. She's like, would you like some options? I'm like, you mean I don't need to listen to all your suggestions right now if I don't have the capacity? It's like,
Well, and a lot of
what?
the time when Serena and if Serena was in the position that I was in during this conversation, normally I would start off be like, okay, how can I best support you right now? Do you want a vent? Do you want some options? Do you want vent and then options? Do you want to talk it through and for me to see if there's things that maybe I can see in this that you haven't noticed yet? Like the first thing I'm going to ask is, how can I help with where you're at right now? Because the same person dealing with the same situations at different times, they're going to need different things. Like if you're in that space where everything is feeling crappy, and like initially you may just want to vent how you're feeling about it and be like, this is what's going on right now, and have someone go, wow, that's a lot. Yeah, I can only imagine how that must feel. Yes, thank you. I feel heard. I feel understood. Awesome. Okay, now I need to actually figure out what I'm going to do about the thing that feels shitty and crappy. Okay, so would you like some help coming up with options? Yeah, actually, that would be really helpful. Okay, so now let's come up with some options. Okay, I feel like it's enough options right now. Anything more than that, and I think I may get. Okay, now would you help some help? Do you want to talk and see if we can help narrow down the options so you have less options to focus on. Yes, that would feel really helpful. Like there are stages that people go through when they're dealing with challenges in their life. And it's so important for you to know what stage are they at when you are trying to support them. Because if they are at the venting stage and you come in with fixes, ain't nothing helpful about that. And in fact, they're probably going to get more stressed and more frustrated about that situation because you're trying. It's like it's like it's like Serena's situation. Like you're having trouble with like I can't. I'm struggling to find water to drink, and someone just keeps throwing chucking glass of water in your face, and it's like, well, yeah, technically that's water, but that's not helpful right now. That's not going to be making this situation better. Likewise, if you're at the point where you want to brainstorm, where you want ideas, where you want help coming up with different options, and somebody's just sitting there going, yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that sucks. That's not helpful in that moment. So it's so important to check in with where is this person at and what support are they looking for in the moment that you're wanting to offer it. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, even if you know what they're looking for, you need to check in with how much of it they need, because personal power need is all, we know options are a big part of personal power need. But the second there become too many options for somebody to actually be able to meaningfully consider, digest, narrow down and choose from, it actually disempowers them in that moment because it moves them further away from making a choice. It no longer, the point of the options is to help facilitate choice. That's why they're there. If you have so many of them that a choice is no longer a viable option because they're so overwhelmed with the number of options and they can't even see the wood for the trees, then the options become a barricade to the choice, which is the real crux of the personal power need, rather than something that's going to support them in meeting their personal power need. And personal power need is critical in moments like this because a lot of the time, if somebody's facing challenges, a lot of the one of the needs that's almost certainly going to be up is personal power, because a lot of the time people don't know what to do. They feel stuck. They feel overwhelmed. They feel like there's nothing they can do, or they feel like they don't know even how to begin in making it. All of those things all relate to the personal power need. Yes, there are likely to be other needs up as well, like emotion, experience, expression, security need, whatever, depending on the situation, circumstances. But personal power need is one that is so important. And a lot of the time, there's this like, let me help you. Let me push all the ideas. Let me fix it for you. And remember, if you are trying to fix somebody else's situation, you are not trying to empower them. You are actually creating a situation in which they will be dependent on you. What you want to do is support in such a way that ignites their personal power, helps them connect to it inside themselves. You are just somebody who is helping to support them with that process. You are not the person who is doing the doing of connecting to the personal power. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people misunderstand about these sorts of situations.
Yeah, definitely. And it can make things so much worse. Like, I don't think, like, it really, really can, because there have been times where I've been making progress and somebody's, kind of just dumped all of the thoughts, all the suggestions on me. And I'm like, oh, now I have to unbury myself. I have to then deal with and sorting through each of those things. Because, like, let's say you get 50 options for something. The way my brain works, each of those 50 options have now gotten some portion of my energy and have gotten some consideration, even if they are the most outlandish of option. Like, I still think and be like, well, what if, like, no, what if I had a spaceship? Like, we don't need to think about that right now. That has nothing to do with the situation at hand. But if somebody puts it as an option, I'm like, well, is that actually an option? Like,
well, now I need to figure out and
just like that little bit of time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I think, and a lot of the time in those situations as well, if you don't have the kind of relationship that like Serena and I have, in that situation, I could be like, whoa, 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 whoa. I need us to reel this way the fuck back in. Let's get back, because now I am feeling stressed about this, and as well as the thing that I was already stressed about. I have stress on top of stress right now. Okay. And Serena would be like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. Okay, let me start to dismiss some of these options for you. That it's not really an
Mhm.
option. Let's be honest. That's not really an option, is it? Let's be honest. And she would probably help. She's buried me in noodles. She'd be like pulling the noodles off one by one, trying to get me unburied from underneath them. Because we have that kind of relationship. Most people, because their value needs are not well met, and well, their needs total are not well met. A lot of times when you're in that situation, there is this feeling of a I need to manage this person's emotions about the fact that I don't want these helpful,
Mhm.
quote unquote, suggestions right now, because if I don't, they're going to react badly and I'm going to have to deal with their bad reaction on top of all the stuff I'm already dealing with. And quite frankly, I don't have it
Mhm.
in me right now. So it gives you even more to deal with on top of the more that you were given to deal with, on top of the more you were already dealing with in the first place.
Well, I think that
It's
brings
fucking
oh,
exhausting.
it is exhausting. And it brings up a good point that, we kind of mentioned, and I just want to reiterate, like, giving suggestions that are really relevant to the situation, to the person as they've
Hmm.
described it. Because if you give a suggestion that just really isn't within the realm of possibility for that person or in the realm of their reality as it is right now, that
Hmm.
creates a disconnect between you and the person that you're trying to help. Like, it
Yes.
then erodes the trust, it erodes some of the bond. If somebody's coming to you with something, it's like, that wouldn't, like, that's not an option in my world. Or even if you don't know, like, Claire's been in situations where she hasn't spoken to somebody in a while, and like they kind of
Hmm.
come at her with all these suggestions. It's like, we're having this conversation, you know enough about me, things haven't changed that much where, like, this thing that you've just suggested is actually a realistic possibility right now.
Well, and it
Like,
makes you feel less seen. It makes you feel
mhm.
less acknowledged, and it makes you feel like that this person doesn't know you in
Right.
that moment. Which also
And
then there's a little sadness associated with that.
exactly, and then they might be a little bit, like, as Claire was saying, what kinda triggered that thought in me is, they might be a little upset that you're not taking these great suggestions they have, and,
Hmm.
"Well, I told them to do X, Y, and Z, and they didn't do any of it." Well, yeah, X, Y, and Z was buy a pony, get in a hot air balloon, and go on across the world trip, like,
Now
uh
those sound like options that I would be on board with. Like that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm needing. But no, seriously, and there are going to be some people for whom that's like, yes, cha-ching,
Mhm.
you've hit the jackpot. Those are exactly and then somebody else would be like, what?
Yeah.
I no, I'm afraid of horses. I don't want to leave my house. And I'm scared of heights too. No, that's not helpful to me right now. So,
Mhm.
and I think that I think that what highlighted this situation was, I said, I had another conversation, very, very, very similar nature, not that long, um, prior to this, with someone who also didn't know the full extent of the situation, with somebody who also didn't understand all the things. The thing is, I was at a different point in the process, and this person just let me talk. In fact, so much so that I actually said to them, like at the end, I'm like, "Oh God, I feel like I've just talked at you for this entire period of time." And they're like, "No, no, no. I wanted to know. There's really not much to update you on from my side. There's a couple of things which we talked about in the natural flow of the conversation." Um, but a lot of it was just validating. A lot of it was just acknowledging. A lot of it was just, and that's where I was at that point. The interesting thing is, I was at the point during the second conversation where I'd started to make progress. I'd started to feel like, okay, I know what my next steps are. I know what the things I'm supposed to be doing. And because I felt like I knew what the next steps were, when somebody else then came in with a million different options that just distracted me from the thing that I already knew where I was meant to be going in terms of my next steps. The path is not clear. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not being like, okay, yeah, I know all the things. I know some of the things. And I need to focus on some of the things that I do know about and get those happening in order to then have the capacity to deal with the next steps when I get to the next steps. But it was almost like they had come in between the venting and the moving forward into the ideas stage, but they didn't realize I'm not at the ideas stage anymore. I don't need ideas at this point. In fact, more ideas at this point are just going to stress me out
Mm.
because they're kind of pulling me in all these different directions when I feel pretty solid. And interestingly enough, it was only a couple of days previously that I'm like, okay, something shifted. Now I feel like I know what I'm meant to be doing, and I need to do this, and I need to do this, and I need to do this, and I need to do this. Perfect. It's such a interesting situation to be in, and it's such a shame because this person, I said, genuinely wanted to help, and if they'd been like at the ideas section, okay, some of the ideas still wouldn't have been helpful, and it probably still would have been overwhelming. I still would have needed them to be reined in a little bit. But at the ideas point, I could have been like, "Oh, yeah, that's something I hadn't thought about. Yeah, maybe that could be something to consider." I mean, the amount of times that I come to Serena, I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna need your noodles on this," because Serena is queen of the noodles. And by that I mean when we talk about ideas and brainstorming, we talk about throwing spaghetti on the wall. So she's always like, "Here's a noodle. This is a bit of a limp noodle. I don't know if it's going to stick, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway." And that's like kind of like, because she knows by telling me that I can be like, "Oh, I'm not really in a space for limp noodles right now. Like I'm done. Like hard noodles only, or like let's just go just al dente." And then those are the ones I can focus on for the moment. Or actually, yeah, throw everything at me. I'm in a place where I'm like ready to catch noodles at the moment, and I'm going to throw them into this massive pot, and I'm going to make a fantastic vegan carbonara with all these noodles that I can then portion out and use bit by bit as I go ahead. But if I'm not at a point where I'm ready for noodles, as I said, I just end up on the couch covered in noodles going, now what the hell do I do? How do I get out from under here?
It's funny, I forgot that the other day. I was like, this is a limp noodle. And the reason why I did that is because I knew the idea was a little bit, it was, I mean, I don't even remember what it was. It was probably
Neither do I.
very off from center, but like, I knew that it like, the idea wasn't in its fullness. It was going to take some other elements. It wasn't going to be like a, hey, here's the idea, let's put it into action. And that
Yeah.
kind of set the stage for like, okay, this is an idea that she's not, a suggestion she's not flinging at me because she thinks it's viable in this moment right now. It's just a general idea. And I think that's kind of helped our relationship in the
Yeah.
sense where it's like, okay, like I know where you're at. And obviously Claire and I are in a point in our relationship. We're pretty consistent on where each other are. But it's also nice to know like that somebody's thinking of the fact that, okay, this might not land right, but it could. So I'll share it if you want me to.
And also, it gives me permission to dismiss it immediately out of hand without thinking, "Oh God, this is a thing." Like, is she going to feel some kind of way about the fact that I'm dismissing it? The very fact that she's like, "This is a really," I mean, I'm not even sure it constitutes a noodle anymore. There's more like just bits of pasta paste that might attach to a wall. We may need to find a way of connecting them up to make it an actual viable noodle. But it's like the difference between that and like somebody who is like serving me bowls and bowls of pasta, expecting me to eat them, versus here's something, I don't know, there could be something. And honestly, when those come at the right moments, that's when those genius moments happen with Serena and I. Like that's the moment where like I cannot tell you how many times when we have no intention, like pasta is off the table. We have decided we are not hungry. We do not want to eat. We are out of the kitchen. It's barricaded. There's locks on the doors. We're not going anywhere near that place. And we're having a random conversation, and then all of a sudden one of us kind of gets a look and the other one goes, "Okay, come on, what is it? I can tell you've had an idea." And all of a sudden we've completely reworked our business plan without intending to. There are noodles flying left, right, and center.
I like to refer to those in for Claire as oudias, because she's always like, ooh, 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 ooh. I'm like, oh, she has an oudia.
Oh my God. You're so
I don't
right.
think
That's
I've
so
ever
what I
told you
do.
that before, have
You
you?
told me that. And that's amazing. I love that. And that
I
is
refer to that
exactly
in my
what I would do.
brain. I'm not telling anybody about your oudias, but I'm like, oh, she had an oudia.
Oh, you've just told everybody about my Udias, and I love it. Yeah, but that's that, and she's right, because and it's like, and with me, I don't have a name for it because I haven't got that far in my focus on Serena's like, but then she gets this look on her face where it's like, and I can see her eye movements start moving, and I'm like, oh shit, that the noodle factory is it's under production. Those things are going to start churning out of there before I even know it. Like, let's get ready to catch some noodles because they're coming my way. I can see it. And it's beautiful because, and I know if we were at that point and I'm like, you know what, I don't have the capacity. Like I love your pasta. It's some of the yummiest pasta on the planet. I could not eat a single morsel right now. Could I ask you a favor? Could you make the dish up, put it into containers, stick it in the freezer, and then when I've got the capacity, I can defrost it and we can have a lovely meal together. Because at that point, I could say to Serena that I don't have the capacity right now, and she could be like, okay, I'm going to take some notes on it. I'm going to retain the idea I have, and then let's have a conversation when you're at a point where you can actually discuss this. Because at that point, and all of this, all of the things we are talking about, every single one of these moments is a opportunity for personal power. It's an invitation to a personal power moment, because in those moments where when I have my ooh-dears, I know at that point Serena could be like, don't you dare, like, no ooh-dears right now.
I have.
Yes,
She's like, ooh,
you
ooh. I'm like, mm-mm.
no, not right now. I'm like, okay, I will now know I can type my ooh-dear down. I love this. And the magic that happens on this podcast. And that's what I can do. And then when she has the capacity, we come back and we have a conversation about it. The second that happens, there's an indicator, even though in that moment I haven't gone, would you like to hear my ooh dear? I know that, she knows what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have that kind of relationship, at any point, either one of us can be like, I don't have it in me right now. Could we put a pin in this and return? And the key thing is how we communicate around that is very mindful of each other's needs. We're not trying to meet each other's needs in how we're doing it, but it is mindful of them. So a lot of the times what will end up happening is that we need to put a pin in something. Like, I really want to have this conversation with you right now. I really want to listen to what you're saying. And I want to do it in such a way where I can give it the time and attention that it deserves. And I don't have that in me right now. Can we have this conversation at another time? In that, we are acknowledging them. We are respecting their value need. We're reassuring them that we see the value in what they're saying, and we're asking for what we need, because it's going to work better for both of us if we do it that way.
So
if we don't, go on.
You continue. I got this one.
If we don't have that conversation, what ends up happening is we're so worried about each other's needs that we end up creating a situation where there is tension, where there is stress. Like, so if I'm like, oh, but I know Serena likes sharing her ideas, so I'm going to listen to the idea when I don't have the capacity, so I'm not really going to listen. I don't have the capacity to talk about it properly. She's probably not going to feel fully seen or acknowledged. Neither of us is going to benefit from the conversation that's about to happen. But that's what a lot of people do. Is that those are the dynamics they get themselves into, instead of being able to say, actually, and you can check in proactively and be like, hey, is this something that would be helpful right now? This is what I've got right now. And there are times when each of us will have those idea moments and we'll be like, okay, I've got an idea. Do you have the capacity for this right now? Or should we table this for another time? We'll be like, yep, lay it on me, or no. And then sometimes it'll be like, you know what? I am exhausted right now, but part of me feels like we need to have this conversation. Come on, let's have it. And that's when a lot of the time the magic happens. It's like, we were not meant to be discussing this today. How the hell have we ended up here? But wow, look at what we've created.
This is not where I was going to go with this, but we're going to go here first and see if I remember the second. Okay. A lot of times, like, when you give a suggestion or get a suggestion and you're not in the right place, it could be a good suggestion. It could be a viable suggestion. Like, some of our ideas and ideas are really good, but if they're not handled, like Claire said, if one of us doesn't have the capacity, and then I'm giving an idea and Claire's in a space and I'm like, oh, it doesn't feel like she's really taking this on, and Claire has her head in 9 million different places because she doesn't have the capacity for it. So I get feeling a certain way, and then Claire feels a certain way because she's having to try and support my needs, because she wants to listen because I have an idea. And then this idea kind of gets like this grime on it that's like, it didn't feel good when we said, we're not going to bring it back up. Like, you can lose some really good things if they're not placed in the right timing, in the right capacity, and kind of with consent, I guess. And
even if it happens at the right timing, the initial response might not be that great to it. And it's okay that that's the case. I remember a situation like just under a year ago where I was I was going to be involved in something, and Serena was helping me with ideas for it. And we had made a plan that we were going to do a certain thing. And then, like a couple of days before the event, Serena comes to me and she's like, I have an idea. Like, I think that we should change up what you're doing. And I remember that moment so vividly because it was like my brain split in two in that moment.
Mhm.
And there's a part of me going, this is a really good idea. And the other half of me going, what do you mean we're changing it? It's 2 days before the event. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Blah, 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 blah. And the good thing was I had enough presence of mind in that moment to be able to say to Serena, I actually think that's a really good idea. My nervous system just needs a minute to freak out
Mhm.
about the timing of all of this. And then we'll be able to have a meaningful discussion about the idea that you've come up with. And because I was able to do that, I was able to go, what the hell? This feels like da 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 blah, blah, blah. And I vented out all the stuff that the panic that was present because of the short time frame that we had. And then I'm like, okay, I think this is a good idea though. Let's move forward with it. So just because the reaction isn't immediately, yeah, that's a fantastic
Mhm.
idea, let's do this, doesn't mean to say it's not being valued. It may just be how somebody needs to process the other stuff that's coming up alongside it. I mean, it may be like there have been moments where Serena suggested something and I'm like, are you kidding me? I've spent all this time and effort doing this thing. And now we're going to go in a completely different direction. Still a good idea, but I'm having some feelings about all the time and effort that's gone into the thing that we were previously trying to do. And now it's
I mean,
like,
we're
hey,
well versed in it at this point because that happens
it's very
often in
true.
our world. You know that
Very
thing?
true.
Like, let's do this. One thing I was gonna say is that like this we've talked about personal options and acting personal power and how this specific situation, whether giving options, receiving options, can positively or negatively impact your personal power. And I want to just
Mm-hmm.
remind people it also can bring your relationships closer together or pull them
Yeah.
apart. We've talked about the
Mm-hmm.
relationship orbits. We'll throw the link to the episode in there. But it's really important to realize that in most of the meetings, I feel like I should think about this before I say it, but then if I think about it too long, I might lose it.
Well,
Like,
throw it out there and I can always tweak it.
I mean, then when it comes to your needs are directly related to the relationships around you. So, like,
What do you mean by that?
I
Are
mean
they
something
affected by the
significant.
relationships? They're affected by the relationships around you?
Um, they can bring the meeting of your needs can bring your relationships closer or
Yes. Or move them
separate
apart.
them based on
Yes.
how you handle the meeting your needs, whether that's setting a boundary and being like, well, no noodles right now,
Yeah.
or like it's the symbiotic nature of your needs and the meeting of your needs and your relationships are so intertwined. And it's like when you
Mm-hmm.
start kind of picking up the things, it's like, well, if I do this for me, that's actually going to help this entire like
Yeah.
ecosystem I have going here. And that's an
Mm-hmm.
amazing thing when you realize that like meeting your own needs can help the relationships around you, can help the people around you. It's a beautiful
Well,
thing.
it means that you have the capacity to show up in a different place because if your needs are met, you're going to show up differently in your relationships than you would do if your needs were unmet. And I think that's like one of the things that Serena's talking about here is that's kind of what sits underneath it is that if you come to your relationships with your needs unmet, then the dynamics, the conversations, the time you're going to spend together is going to be vastly different to what it will be if your needs are met. And if you are showing up, albeit with good intention, in a way that is negatively impacting somebody else's needs, that is going to impact your relationship with them. And this is where the kind of impact over intention thing comes in. And we'll put the link to the episode where we talk about that in the show notes. Intention does matter in that if you intend to negatively impact somebody else's needs, their needs and your own are going to be more severely impacted than if you didn't intend to. But intention doesn't matter if you negatively impact them. It's not going to in any way mitigate the amount of negative impact that you've had if you're in that moment. And so that's the reason that like it's it's so important to ask for consent. It's so important to check in with where the other person is in their process, because we all go through this process with challenges. We might not go through the same stages in the same order at the same time frame, but we're all going to go through different phases when it comes to challenges that we've got in our lives. And this is where we've talked about this in the past, how questions are so powerful, and they can be the difference between you showing up in a way that is supportive for somebody and you showing up in a way which is unintentionally negatively going to impact them. So for example, you come in and you're like, okay, as I said, when Serena's coming to me with any kind of problem or challenge, almost the first thing out of my mouth is like, how can I best support you with this right now? What are you looking for from me? And what is the thing that would be most helpful for where you're at right now? And the answer may be, I'm so in it, I don't know, which is okay, because then you can provide options of that. Like, would it feel helpful? Do you want to just vent it out right now? Do you want somebody to listen and to feel heard and to acknowledge you and validate you? Do you want someone to come up with ideas? Do you want help taking action on things? Because at that point, it's like, okay, and I would say, generally speaking, this is a general rule of thumb. It is nuance. I'm going to caveat what I'm about to say. And it is not true in every situation, because I can imagine Serena going, well, that's not always the case with us if when I say this. But I would say in most situations, the ideal number of options for somebody to be able to realistically focus on is between 3 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
3 is kind of the sweet spot. If you can really hone in on 3 good ones, sometimes you need the 5 because you need a couple in there that are easy. No, this is not a good fit, in order to help narrow it down and also to help them connect. We've talked about this on a previous podcast episode about sometimes you need to consider the unviable options, or you can need to consider options to realize what you don't want as well as what you do. We've talked about that in conversations that we've had before, where we've brought that up on the podcast. So 3 to 5, I would say 5, generally speaking, is the maximum. Now you can get to 5 and be like, okay, how does that feel? Would you like more options? They can invite more options. You can ask them if they would like more options than that. But as soon as you start getting over that, because of the things associated with the different options, you're like, if you imagine that each of those options has got 5 things associated with it, they're now having to think about 25 different things. That can be a lot. If you've got 3 things, that's 15 different things. If you've got 2 things, that's only 10 different things. And it's like, okay, this is this option, this is this option. Like that, sometimes that binary, it's this or it's this, what do you think, can be helpful. Like 2 is also a good option, as long as those are 2 really kind of awesome options that are solid, viable. Okay, it's this or it's this. What do you think? That was me last year when I was considering, like, when I was realizing I needed to move out. Do I go back to the UK? Do I go and stay on the boat? Those were 2 solid options. And it was like, okay, this feels like the best option for where I'm at right now and for the next month, 2 months, whatever it was. So be mindful of the amount that you are giving to somebody. You can always offer more and say, would you like more options than that? Or it may be that you start with your 5 and you go, okay, why don't we dwindle those down till we get to 2? And then it may be like, okay, now we've got 2 solid options. Do you want to see if there are any more available? Now we're only focusing on 2 plus another 3. So we still stick within that 3 to 5 range. Anything more than that is likely to feel overwhelming for most people. So if you want a kind of general rule of thumb to start off with, but the first and most important thing is like to ask questions, because Serena and I are very lucky in the sense that we know each other incredibly well. So if Serena's throwing options my way, she probably already knows 80 to 90% of the information that's going to be relevant to the options that she is presenting. If you don't know somebody well enough to know that 80 to 90% of the information, then before you start making options or offering options, it might be worth doing some information gathering. So like let me just check in. Now, is this something that is viable? Like, let's look at accommodation. So it may be that somebody is looking to move into a new place. Well, Do they want to stay in the same town that they're currently in? Do they want to move to a different area of the same country? Do they want to move to a different country? Do they not yet know which of these? Because depending on the answer to that question, the options you provide are going to be vastly different. And you need that information to be able to provide meaningful options. Because that's the thing, is that just providing options isn't helpful. The options have to be meaningful, relevant, and viable in the circumstances in order, even if you're at the option gathering stage, even if you're like, yeah, noodle palooza, start up the spaghetti machine, let's get this thing cracking. If you're like, great, weird example, but it's like, yeah, I'm all for, like, throw some spaghetti my way, but if I'm gluten free and someone just chucks wheat noodles at me the entire time, I'm like, that's not helpful. I'm gluten free. Like, throw me a gluten free noodle, throw me a rice noodle, throw me a bulgur wheat noodle, whatever it is. Like, those are options that would be helpful once you understand a kind of gluten. So it's like, you want to find this kind of question and answer flow to be able to inform the options that you are offering, to be able to inform whether it's the right time for options, to inform how many options somebody needs or that would feel helpful to somebody, and to then find out, would it be helpful for you to help them narrow the options so that they are able to get back into a space where it feels manageable? Because a lot of the time when people are in this space where they're kind of struggling with something, things feel overwhelming, unmanageable, they feel disempowered. So the more that you can support them, and remember, there is a big difference between phrasing options as questions that they can consider and telling somebody the things that you would do in their situation or that you think they should do. One is, here's what I think you should do. Is this something that you would be interested in? And one is moving them away from their personal power. The other is moving them towards it, which is like helping them to remember, okay, yes, this is about me. This is about what I want. And is this something that I want? Yeah, actually, that's something that would be really helpful. That is something that does feel like it would resonate with me. No, that doesn't. Okay, right. We dismiss that and we come up with more options that are outside of that. And that question and answer flow is the key to be able to provide options that will actually meaningfully lead to somebody being in a place where they feel that they can make a conscious choice that feels right for them.
And like most of the things that we talk about, when you start doing this stuff, it feels a little weird. It feels a little weird to say this to people that you've had the same kind of dialogue with for, maybe years. And then like all of a sudden being like, would you like suggestions, or like changing how you approach these situations? And it can also feel weird to the person on the other side being like, all right, did you listen to a podcast or something? Like where is this coming from? And it at first, it can be like, I remember bringing this into my relationships. People are like, all right. However, what happens is you get that, like I said, it brings you together. I don't know anybody who's going to be like, well, wow, they considered my feelings too much. They considered where I was at. Like, because
They
it's
wanted
so
to know how I was feeling.
exactly. We're in a society where a lot of it is focused on ourselves. So to have somebody be like, okay, what's going to actually be supportive to you? Like, I'm not just going to throw out what works for me because you're not me. So like,
I've got a new pasta machine and I really want to use it. Like that's
right.
not where it's coming from.
But I want to just say, like, it will be weird. It will sound weird. It will feel weird, but it will make things so much better. Like, embrace that weird.
Yeah. And this is like, and connect to the, okay, two things. You want to connect to the reason that you're doing this. The reason you're doing this is because you care about this person and you want to help this person. So figuring out the way that is going to do that best is going to hit your intention. Like if you're and the final thing I kind of want to say before we finish up on this is that if there is a hesitation or a resistance to you in asking these questions, checking with the other person, or there is this like fear that they might not want to take the suggestions that you are offering, you need to check your needs. Because what it may be is that you are trying to get your needs met by helping somebody else, i.e., what we call rescuer mode. And when you're in rescuer mode, you're trying to help somebody else, but you're using that as a way of trying to fulfill your needs. Like you're trying to feel valuable by offering options that the other person is going to take. And what you care about is them taking the option so you can feel good about the fact that you were the one that gave it to them. Or you might want to feel emotionally good about the fact that they're no longer in as much of a struggle because they've got a solution to the problem, and therefore you cannot worry about them as much as you did. All of that's all about you. And so if you want to help somebody else, please, 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 before you go into that situation, check in with your needs. Make sure that your needs are well met first, because if you go in with unmet needs, those could play into the conversation. And at that point, it's no longer just about the other person. It's about your needs are going to muddy the water, because the unmet needs are going to be pulling the strings subconsciously. You might not realize it. You might not understand that's what's happening, but they're going to be pulling the strings of the things you say, the things you feel, and how you react. And if you really want to help somebody else because they're going through a tough time, being able to take your needs out of the equation, not to say they're not relevant, but meet your needs. So you don't need them to respond in any particular way. If Serena throws every single noodle, if literally, if I took every noodle I threw at her and she's like, nope, lobbed it out the window, I'm like, okay, next one, try this one. Nope, that's out the window. Like if that was to happen, if my needs are well met, I don't need her to take any of my ideas. Do I want to help? Yeah. If I'm not coming up with ideas that are helpful, I need to check, like maybe I don't have enough information to be coming up with ideas that are actually going to be helpful in this situation. Maybe I need to ask some more questions.
She rejected 10 of my noodles. What the fuck? Well, maybe you should look at the noodles you're throwing.
Right. Exactly. It's like if I'm like go back to the gluten-free thing. If like every noodle Serena throws at me has got gluten in it, I'm like, oh, no, no, no. And she checks in and goes, okay, let me just check in. Like, help me to understand what wasn't working about those so I can, oh, they've all got gluten in them. Oh, okay. Well, I've got rice noodles. I've got these noodles. I've got spaghetti squash. I can make noodles out of that for you if you like. And at that point, it's like, a lot of the time what ends up happening is if somebody doesn't take our ideas and suggestions, is that we can take that personally as there's something wrong with the idea and therefore there's something wrong with us, versus seeing it as feedback. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, like feedback is a gift. And if you can see it as feedback and to be like, okay, I want to understand why these aren't landing. And if I don't understand why they're not landing, then because they may communicate that to you, like, oh no, that doesn't work for this reason, that doesn't work for this reason, that doesn't work for this reason. If all those reasons are the same, that's your feedback that you need to, there's something fundamentally wrong with the pasta dough that you're using. So instead you can use it as a way of, okay, so let me ask them some questions to help formulate better answers or better suggestions. Because if I understand the situation, if I'm not hitting the mark, that may be because I don't understand the situation. And if I don't understand the situation, if I can get some more information, okay, oh, you're gluten-free. Oh, and you're vegan. So you're kind of egging them either. Okay, try this noodle. Try this noodle. Oh, actually, that sounds like that could be, yeah, okay, that might work. That might work. I kind of prefer a creamier sauce better than a tomato-based sauce. Okay, cool. Right. In which case, now I'm going to throw you carbonara. I'm going to throw you I don't know pasta sauces well enough to
carbonara on
more
the
than
brain,
one
don't you?
It's one of the kids' favorites, like mac and cheese. There you go. There's another one that's a white sauce based one. But it's like, that's how, like, if you really do see it as like, this is not about me, and their response is not about me. And instead, how can I make it about them? And how can I find out what I need to find out in order to make sure that the things I'm offering are helping? And it could just be if like you fire 3 noodles their way and they're like, no, like, and maybe we forgot to check in. Would it be helpful if I just stopped coming up with options right now? Would you prefer to just vent right now and talk about this? Yeah, I just need to get this out of my system. Thank you so much. Questions are your friend. And if we can take care of our needs and be curious about what are the needs of the other person, what are the things that are relevant to their situation, and how can we listen to that in order that we can show up for offering the right support at the right time, and also be able to understand better how to support better with better ideas and better options, making sure that there aren't too many of them, there aren't too few, because if you only have one option, that doesn't really feel like an option. It feels like like you don't have a choice. The second you feel like you only have one option, your personal power needs probably going to go out the window. The second you have two, even they're two options you don't necessarily like, you might not like the two options, but you can still choose this one is better for me than this one. And even that act alone is going to help support somebody's personal power, even in a crappy situation. Anything you want to add to this before we finish up?
Mm-mm.
There are so many more noodles that could get flung at the screen right now. Like, yeah. So on that note, we will put our pasta machines away and take our noodles away for another week, which I'm sure we'll be back next week with more noodles of a different variety. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Remember, between now and next time, to stay safe, take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye-bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and give us a written review,
as it will help more people find us. And remember, before you offer suggestions, you might want to start with some questions.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.